Shalom, everyone. Welcome to Hebraic Awakening. We are going to study Messiah and the women and how he tore down discriminatory practices against women during the first century. Disclaimer: when I am uplifting the women, it doesn't mean that I am tearing down men. All right. I want that understanding because we need to look at the role of women in the kingdom and we need to begin to tear down all of the foolishness that has been going on, okay, since the fall of Adam. Just because things are recorded in the Bible doesn't mean that Yahweh, our Elohim, agreed with them. He is telling the people to record it, and it is up for us to dig out the meaning, right? So I want men to really pay attention because this is going to help you to understand the women in your community better. It's going to help you to understand the role of your wife and your daughters and how you have to help them to develop into the women that the Most High wants them to be by loving them and supporting them and not having the same mind of the Sanhedrin, the scribes, and the Pharisees at the time of Messiah. So we want to tear that down. So let's dig in and see how Messiah just breaks up all of the foolishness going on. I love it because all throughout the gospel accounts, he is just hammering on all of the foolishness. Now, we are talking about the first century foolishness, all right, of the Sanhedrin. Most of them was Edomites anyway, all right? So, what we have to understand during the time of Messiah, that these rabbis, they made a lot of oral laws that they held higher above Torah, right? And they thought they were doing the people a favor by making these little fences around Torahs to keep people from sinning. But really, it was to keep people to obey them and their law. That's really what it was about. So let's talk. And I'll be looking at my notes sometimes. All right. Women, men were taught not to greet women in public, right? Even men will sometimes not even greet their own wives. Ain't that crazy? Women back then who were married had to wear a veil. This veil not only represented modesty, but it represented her status. Okay, so this veil probably was recommended by men, right? And this veil was to keep the men from lusting and looking at married women. It's always the women who have to adjust. It's never the men who have to adjust, right? So keep that in mind. So the women, they had to adjust so that the men, could remain pious. And we all know that don't work. We all know that no matter how you wear your skirt to the floor and your collar down to your wrist and your shirt up to the highest point of your neck, that is not going to stop sexual perversion. It's not going to stop sexual assault. Okay? So we know that, yet men still want women to cover up so that they right can feel better. And yes, I believe in modesty, but modesty from a Hebrew standpoint, it is not just about your clothes. And maybe I'll do a really quick teaching on modesty from an Hebrew perspective. So if you want me to do modesty from a Hebrew perspective, please leave it in the comments below. All right. Now we know there were women recorded in history that were leaders and things of that nature, but again, we're keeping it in context, first century. All right. So we know that men were not allowed to greet women, even their own wives. We talked about the veil. Women could not go into the synagogue or the religious services. They would have to stay in the women's court. They were exempt. Let me stress this. It wasn't that they were not allowed to do these things I'm getting ready to say. They were exempt from doing it. Who made up the exemption? The rabbis. So they were exempt from reciting the Shema morning and night, something that's a tradition. They were exempt from listening to the reading of the Torah. They need to be there. They raising children. How come they have to be exempt from the reading of the Torah? It's so silly. What else? They weren't even exempt from the feast days. Are you kidding me? Now we know that though some of the women showed up to the feast days anyway. So again, that's why I'm saying this is about exemption. It's not about that they were not allowed. They were exempt. So don't go around talking about, and they weren't even allowed to go to the feast days. That's not what I said. I said exempt, right? They were exempt, meaning they had a choice to stay at home. But that is not what the Torah instructs us to do. All right. Now, let's get to the first witness. So I am doing 3 witnesses or 3 women, right? To keep the video as short as possible. So the first witness or the first woman, the widow of Nain. Yes. So we're going to read it slow because I want people who want to learn how to study to learn how to read and ask questions, all right? So get your Bible. Let's read. Verse 11. Now it happened the day after that he went into a city called Nain. Stop. In my version, there's a semicolon there. I don't know about your version, but we need to stop because we need to ask the question, what's important about the city of Nain? Right? I'm glad you asked. Let's go back in time and talk about it. I believe the city of Nain, name means beautiful. I believe it was a poor village or city, but the name means beauty or beautiful. Now, it is a short distance from Shunem. What is important about Shunem? I'm glad you asked. Let's go back to the prophet Elijah. You remember that story where the prophet Elijah raises the woman's son from the dead? Right? So now we get the backdrop. We get the backdrop of Nain. Why it's important? Why did the author put it in there? Because it is helping you to connect Messiah to Torah. He is a living, breathing Torah, and it's helping you to connect him to the works of a prophet. Let's continue reading. And many of his Talmudim went with him, a large crowd. And when he came near the gates of the city, behold, a dead man was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. Ding, ding, ding. Let's stop right there. This widow had lost her only son. This is very important. In Hebraic culture, it is super important for a widow to be covered. That's why he instructs us throughout Torah to take care of the widow, the orphans, and the poor. However, during the first century, they wasn't doing that like they were supposed to, right? So when a woman became widowed and her family was not supporting her like they should, she became an outcast. She became vulnerable. She had economic hardship. Like she was like an outcast to society. So what does Messiah do? Let's read. When the master saw her, he had compassion on her and said to her, do not weep. Let's stop, right? There's a funeral procession. The widow is weeping. Her only son is dead. And he said he saw her. That's very important. Why? I'm glad you asked. Back to Genesis chapter 16, verse 13. Now, you all remember the story of Hagar. Okay, Sarah, Abraham, and Hagar. You remember that. And you remember how she was put out the house. However, Yahweh saw her. Then she called the name of the master who spoke to her because he saw her. Now he speaks to her. Right? You see that? The name of the master who spoke to her because he saw her. You are the Elohim who sees. For she said, have I also here seen him who sees me? Therefore, the well was called Bir Laha Roe. Observe, it is between Kadesh and Bered. Right. Yahweh who sees me. The Most High is just so good. I just love studying His Word, okay? Because the Master Torah teacher is also tying you back to that story. Just the Master Torah teacher, all right? And He raises her son from the dead, just like He blessed Hagar's son to become a powerful nation. They are powerful to this day. What is so significant about him resurrecting her son? Now we know that he was resurrected. However, I want to keep it in context of the widow. He gave her her identity back. He spoke to her in public. Then he pronounced a blessing over her by raising her son from the dead, now restoring her identity and restoring her economic status. Now her son can cover her, and she is no longer vulnerable to society. She can walk with her head held high. He saw her and he blessed her. All right, we're going to go to woman number 2, witness number 2. The woman with the infirmity of blood. We all know this story. So we have already set the backdrop how you can't be mingling and keying with these women. we just said that. Now he here with another woman. Now, granted, she's seeking him out. She heard about Yeshua and she is seeking him out. We at Luke 13 and 12. She is ritually unclean. Leviticus 15, 25 through 27. So this is not ritually unclean is not some type of sin. It just means you're ritually unclean. As long as you are not like in a set apart place, right? You just take a mikvah and wait till sundown when you're ritually unclean. All right. So study what it means to be ritually unclean. All right. And let's talk about that. Because she touches the tzitzits, right? That represents the commandments. She touches him. Now, she doesn't make him ritually unclean, as everybody thought she would. Like, whoa, wait a minute. Messiah, like, hey, who touched me? At the time of Eve, like, are you serious? It's a whole bunch of people bumping and pushing and all that. And you gonna ask us who touched you? Everybody touching you. But she drew from those commands and she drew healing. And although she was ritually unclean, it did make him ritually unclean. I did a video talking about holiness in its correct context. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. You are supposed to be holy as Yahweh, our Elohim, is holy. So Messiah is teaching you what holiness is supposed to do. And as I said in my video, holiness does not become contaminated because it comes in contact with sin. Holiness transforms. transforms. It's like an operating room. When you go to the operating room, there is strategy inside the room to heal you. The doctors have already set up an intricate, detailed strategy to bring about healing. Everything has to be clean, right? Everything has to be set apart. But when you bring your little contaminated self up into the room, they can handle it. That is what holiness is. Your holiness is supposed to transform everywhere that you go. So just because you meet people that think different than you, they eat different than you think that when you sit with them, like Kiefer, aka Peter, did, he thought that Gentiles were like dogs, make him unclean if he just came in contact with them. But Messiah is debunking all of the foolishness. You are not ritually unclean because you come in contact with holiness. If you are holy, you're supposed to transform the sin. And that's exactly what his holiness did. And he restored her identity. Now she could walk about, she could touch people, she can mingle if she wants to, and she is not seen as an unclean person. She is healed. Now, let me back up. Let me back up a minute. Because this woman may have been a widow. And I haven't did a video, I think, on this channel. Maybe I did it in a Torah study, but I haven't did a video on marriage. So Hebraic marriage, right? You really need to study Hebraic marriage because part of the ketubah or the marriage contract agreement is that the husband is supposed to take care of his wife when she is ill. That's a part of the ketubah to bring healing to his wife, all right? So the rabbis, here they go. If your wife is just too sickly and it costs too much money to heal her, you can give her a get, a right of divorce. And you're supposed to give her the dowry. So as time evolved, they would take the dowry and put it up. They wouldn't spend it. They would put it up because technically in the Torah, if you gave her a get or a writ of divorce, you had to compensate her with what we would call alimony. You couldn't just divorce her and put her out destitute. You had to give her the alimony or the ketubah, right? So that's why men was like, man, this is too much. Okay. But anyway, so it is believed that she was a widow because it said that she gave all that she had to try to fix her condition. So we think that she had a writ of divorce because her husband could no longer afford for her, right, to be healed. He couldn't afford it. So he gave her the money and put her out. And she has spent it all up. What is it? 18 years? Just spent everything she had. She ain't have nothing else. So she had to get to Messiah to grab the seats for healing. Now, I love it because Yeshua, in this instance, said, daughter. Messiah is all about restoring the true identity to the women, right? We just saw how he restored the identity of the widow back to her. Now he calls this woman daughter, restoring her identity. You are the daughter and seed of Abraham. I'm like, yeah. Matthew 28, we see that Miriam and Martha are instructed to go tell the Talmudim or the disciples that the Messiah has resurrected. But before they can even get to the Talmudim, Messiah meets them on the way, all right? And they don't recognize him, and he doesn't let on that it's him just yet. So when he first speaks to them, especially Miriam, the chief Talmudim. Yes, the women were Talmudim. Yes, the women studied Torah. Yes, they sat at the feet of Messiah, right? We already can see that throughout scripture, right? So, the chief Talmudim of the women, Miriam of Magdalene, we see that he speaks to her and he calls her woman at first. And then when she's like, the Messiah's gone and they done took his body and we don't know where it is. And he like, you don't really understand. Then he does something monumental. He says, Miriam. Man, that gives me chills. Miriam. He calls her by her name to let her know that I know you. And she says, Messiah Rabboni. Y'all, this is right. This is really good to me. Because that's why I don't care what none of these Jacqueline Negroes say concerning women. You can't teach. Shut up. Be quiet. You need to cover up. Women sometimes know more Torah than the men. And that's okay, right? It's just not a battle or a competition. But again, that's just what it has to become. So let's get back. He says, Miriam. And he calls her. Then he tells her, go and tell. Listen, when you take the time to break this down in tidbits, when you understand that she was a Talmudim, she was a student who studied closely with the Mashiach. And then he says, go tell the Talmudim. Now she has transitioned from a Talmudim to a Shiliach or Shilikah for women. As she transitions from a Talmudim, a disciple, to an apostle. What is an apostle? It's really simple. I know people make it all complicated, but she is holding the authority, right, to go and to speak on the behalf of the sender. She has the authority. Now, she was the Talmudim, the chief Talmudim, right, especially of the women. Now she is an apostle to the apostles. He's telling her, go tell. I'm giving you the authority to go tell my Talmudim. Because, wait a minute. The Talmudim, they all left Messiah when he was being arrested and going to the court and got charged. The only one that stayed was Yohanan, I believe, John. But where was the rest of them? Gone. And the women stayed the whole time. She is an apostle to the apostles. You just have to take time to break this down and to get out of the box that you have been given and to read and study things from an Hebraic perspective. Even though we see discriminatory practices that was embedded in the culture during the first century, we see Messiah debunking it all. And we see Yahweh, our Elohim, backing him up. So, I'm done. I'm done. You just can't get no better than that, right? So I'm with Messiah. If you don't believe him, right, because he's telling you he's the Mashiach, believe him for his works.